just commenting on the wisdom of what you have been saying, but as a younger person, and perhaps I'm twice your age, when I was your age, I had a lot more courage and a lot more desire. But I understand exactly where this lady is coming from. And once you get, I used to hope that I'd get my act together by the time I was 50.
Yeah.
And then I pushed it to 60. And I'm headed for 70 and hoping that it gets right then. And I realise that it's up to me.
Yeah.
But sometimes my desires are not what other people who I'm responsible for or with or family. So can you give me some wisdom on that one, please?
Sure. And thanks for the compliment, by the way, about being half your age. Because that made you nearly 100, actually. But let's look at the issue of desire and following. Almost all the time we don't follow our desires, it's because we're afraid of what other people will think. All right? Well, you think about it. Every single time you walk down the street and you start to feel like you're feeling pretty happy and you want to skip. So how many of you just automatically just start skipping, you know? Like, how many of you do that? Right? But how many children do you notice do that? Do you notice how many in comparison? Can you see the difference? Like, why does a child want to do that and the adult doesn't want to? Isn't it because the child doesn't feel the projection, and in fact there are far less projections at the child, skipping. But when an adult skips, what does everyone around think? What an idiot. Like, you know, like, what's this person doing? What's wrong with their head? You know, there's all these projections, right? There's lots of projections at the adult for doing what the child is allowed to do, right? And so what we finish up happening as we grow up is we start gathering all of these environmental fears into our soul. And they become the determining factor of how we live our lives. Right? And when that happens, we are now not really truly being ourselves, but rather we are doing what our environment is dictating. So my suggestion is to forget about everything that other people think you should do and focus firstly on what would love do. Right? What would love of yourself do, and then what would love of others do. So when you start focusing on what love of self or love of others would do, you will start taking actions that other people will often project at you that you shouldn't take, but you'll do it in joy. You will enjoy it, and you'll do it in the motion of joy. Because what will happen is that you are starting now to live in total harmony there with God's laws and principles, and you're also living in harmony with the law of love of self and others. And that brings a lot of happiness. It's the fear about others' opinions that causes most suppression. And it's also an additional thing occurs with our fear as we're growing up. When we're young, we are not aware of the pain of our mistake. Does that make sense? So when we make a mistake when we're young, often our mistakes don't even feel painful when we're young, right? But as we grow up in our life, we often start accumulating through our environment, and usually through the environment's projection, the pains of our mistakes. And so that then determines our future course of action every single time. So my suggestion instead is to go back to those pains that cause you to now feel fear whenever you contemplate a certain action. So you're feeling joy, you feel like you want to skip. Trust me, most of you who are 70 or 80 still feel like you want to skip sometimes, right? And you don't do it. Now, one reason might be you're afraid of having a bung knee and it's going to just collapse on you, right? Another one might be that you're afraid of what other people will think of a 75-year-old woman skipping along the road. You know, they'll think, oh, what's gone wrong with her, right? And other times you'll think, you know, people will think all sorts of things, and none of it's any of your business, really, what they think, because all that matters is what you feel inside of yourself, and you're allowed to act in harmony with what you feel as long as what you feel is harmonious with love. And skipping is certainly not disharmonious with love, is it? Or truth, or anything else for that matter. So when you go down the shopping centre, you'll start riding your trolley, right? Because it's quite good fun. You notice a lot of children try to do it before their parents shut them down. Isn't that the case? Right? So I'm there riding my trolley along the aisle, right? This happens, as Mary knows, on every time we go shopping. And I get these angry projections from these older ladies in particular, right, saying to me, "What's this idiot doing?" Do you know? And the truth is, all I'm doing in that particular moment is just enjoying myself, as anybody would when they've got some wheels that have got a big heavy balance on the front and they can actually use that to ride, you know. And so, you know, and it's amazing how fast you get your shopping done. Because you can just, you know, push yourself off down the aisle and before you know it, you're at the spot and just put on the skids and away you go, right? You're laughing, but this is what happens every day when we go shopping. And so what happens is that we get to the point where we're willing to just be ourselves no matter what is thrown at us. And when we get to that point, we will feel free of fear. It's the fear that dictates a lot of our very, very negative reactions to our own desires, for example. There is no harm in doing everything that you desire as long as what you're desiring is harmonious with love and truth. There is no harm in it at all. The problem we face is the world that we live in defines a lot of things as unloving or or untruthful or unloving or wrong. And in reality, it's got nothing to do with love at all or truth at all, but it's got everything to do with the fact that, you know, the reason why particular older ladies project at me is they're afraid that I'm going to hit them with my trolley. Does that make sense? That's what so they see me boring up, right, down the aisle, and they're going, you know, and all it is they're afraid that I won't love them, that I won't take notice that they're there. Does that make sense? And the truth is I stop way before I'm near any person when I'm doing it because I love them and I don't want to hit them. I don't want to hurt them. And so I love them, and so I've got a whole free aisle. Of course I'm going to go down that pretty quickly, right? Until I get to near a person who I don't want to hit, and I'll just stop and say, "Thank you." And as Mary knows, there's quite a lot of looks that we get in the process. But the beauty of it is that, you know, if I love them, I will not do it to their detriment. Right? But I can still enjoy myself. And that's what eventually will happen in your own life. If you love a person, you won't do something to their detriment, but you're allowed to enjoy yourself, and you won't be driven by a fear of displeasing them all the time. So what often happens when we're shopping is I get lots of rageful projections from people that I have had no effect on whatsoever except triggered their fear. That's all that's happening. And they're afraid that I might do something. Right? Yeah. I remember one time I was sitting on top of this. This was some time ago. There's this where I used to live. There was this railway line going out across a great big ravine. And the ravine was probably, you know, a couple of 100 metres wide and maybe 100 metres deep. And they hadn't got sidebars on this railway line. You could just walk along it 100 metres above the ground, looking down in between the rails, right? And it was awesome because you could go right out in the middle and sit down, and then there was a creek going along the middle, and you could take a collection of rocks with you and just, you know, how you do this thing, you just drop them down and they go down and down and down and down and then hit with a splash, you know. And so I'm just sitting there with my two sons, dropping these rocks down. Anyway, this group of people come walking along. They're at least 50 yards away from where these rocks are dropping. Mm-hmm. And yet the man turns around and swears and curses at us for doing it. And he's saying how, you know, it could have hit his daughter or son, and it could have hit him, and, you know, all these kind of things. And yet we're like ages away from them. So what's going on? What's going on is that other people often feel fear from what you do. But that doesn't mean that what you did was not loving. Do you follow me? Just because someone projects at you their rage, which is a result of their fear, it doesn't mean that what you did was wrong. Right? And even if it was wrong, if you have a feeling of repentance for it right at that moment, there is no need for their rage anyway, really. So what often happens is we finish up getting controlled not only by our own fear, but we also then get controlled by everyone else's fear, which then turns into judgment. So my suggestion is stop letting yourself change your life just because somebody judged you. Allow yourself to deal with the emotion inside of yourself that got triggered when you were judged. Now, can you see, as life progresses and our age accumulates, many times these fear-based experiences accumulate. And so often by the time we're 40 or 50 or 60, we have a lot more fear than when we were 20 because we don't release our fears. We started with our fears when we were very, very little, usually in a very early childhood, and those fears keep on getting dumped on and more dumped on and more dumped on us and more dumped on us. By the time we're 25, we've now been through a few relationships which had their own fears added, and then it gets more dumped on us and more dumped on us. By the time we're 35, we've had quite a few jobs that were all added to our fears now, and that gets done. And again, you see, by the time we're getting to 40 or 50 now, we're getting afraid to even act because that might happen, or this might happen, or that might happen, or this might happen. What we need to do is release these fears, which are all covering, of course, causal emotion anyway, grief. Release the grief, and what will happen is that you will no longer feel afraid to act at any age. Right? So you'll have the same feeling that you had when you were 20, and you'll be 70. And you'll have the same feeling as to what you can do. And ironically, because you've released a lot of the emotions too, your body will feel a lot of times like it's 20 or 25 as a part of that process. Can we have the mic there? So, if we can flick the... can we turn it on? Thank you.
I might just share my secret with a room full of strangers. So I like to think that I still have that great joy of life and great joy of living. And I met a man from Newcastle 6 months ago, and we've got together on about 4 occasions. Anyhow, I thought he was here with me for the last 5 days. And I think it was around about last Friday when there had been a really heavy downpour of rain at Noosa. Mm-hmm. So out of the blue I said to him, when the rain stopped, let's go to the beach, or could we go to the beach? Yes, that's fine, and we'd been to the beach for morning swims, that was okay. So I was so elated to have sort of spent some glorious moments with him that I said, this might sound a bit bizarre, but I'm going to wear my fur coat down to the beach. So it just covers the pubic hair. Right, yeah. And I also put pink feathers around my neck. Yeah, yeah. And anyhow,
I'm very impressed now.
As we were going out through my front door, I said to him, "Do you like this?" And I was naked underneath.
You gave him a flash, did you? Awesome.
The stretch of Noosa Beach is not very long. I don't know, 300-400 yards. Yeah. And I've been going to Noosa for the last 25 years and lived there for the last 13. And it was magical down there. Mm. No one else. And I said that to him. And anyhow, we didn't even get to the row of rocks that protrude. And with no verbal communication, he turned around and started walking back. And I said to him, "What's happening? Why are you doing this?" He said, "I'm not enjoying this." And he left next day. Yep. And then when he got back to Newcastle, rang to say, I can see no value in having further communication with you. And I have never done that with anyone else.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty hurt over that.
Yeah. So what was happening there really was that you, through your childlike actions, just triggered a man's emotions that he couldn't cope with himself. He had his own response to that. His own response was one of fear. He was afraid. And maybe he was afraid that, you know, you might flash yourself to somebody else, or maybe he was afraid that somebody would catch him, or somebody would look at you and think he's
There was
stupid.
no one there.
But he was afraid. And his fear dictated all of his subsequent actions. And this is the problem, is that oftentimes we do a childlike thing and then get hammered for it, right? We then get treated badly because of the childlike thing we did. And then we go down the track of, I shouldn't be childlike because of that event. And my suggestion is you need to allow yourself to be as childlike as you were in that moment, and you will eventually, when you work through the underlying emotion, attract a man who's going to really love that childlike expression.
I said to him I couldn't imagine any man in the world not being absolutely rapt to have a lady like that on his arm.
I agree totally.
Anyway.
I agree totally. And there's something in that for him, like in terms of his emotional. There's something emotionally going on for him, obviously, in that issue. And this is probably what I'm saying, is that often events occur where we were childlike, we get judged for it, which is basically what's happened to you. You've gotten judged by this man for the actions that you took. And as a result of that judgment, we feel the pain of it. The key now is to go into that emotionally, because there is still some pain in there from obviously very much earlier experiences where judgments occurred in your life. Release that, and then you'll feel free to do what you did that day anytime you want.
Not this afternoon, though. I only had the courage to tell you the truth, thinking that other people here might be able to accept what you have just said to me. Otherwise, I'm very private.
Yeah, I realise that. But it's very nice you mention it, because it illustrates the point, doesn't it, that often when we are ourselves completely, we get very terrible judgments from others, which then create hurt within ourselves that we often try to avoid the experience of. And all we need to do is feel the feeling of it and then go and do the same thing again, right? The only time we don't do something is if it's unloving, right? So we need to stop. We need to start challenging this world we live in with loving acts. Love towards ourselves and towards others. Ian, up the back there.
I'll be 72 in April, and I volunteer at the local retirement village. And I have a lot of fun there, particularly with sing-along. I get in the middle of the group and I dance around with a pair of maracas to the beat of the music, and I get lots of smiles and a lot of sort of people coming out of themselves.
Yep.
Anyway, that's just something where I was having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Want to share with you.
And it's very, very important to start connecting with the fun things that you like doing. Like, you see a lot of times on the Divine Love Path, many of you get stuck in the emotional sadness, right? And we do have a lot of grief that we do need to experience. But we get into this place where we no longer do things we desire, right? And the key is to stay desirous. In fact, if you grow on the Divine Love Path, you'll actually see more and more of your desires and start following them. But the desires disharmonious with love will always finish up creating some pain at some point. And we need to allow ourselves to feel that pain and release the pain. But you'll find that as you grow, there will be more and more desire in you. And that will be very, very good. That's